Cool. So this video is on our humans' effect on the atmosphere in the past 250 years or so. I'm going to go over some stats. I'm going to give some explanations to my best ability, right? So, I mean, the reason I'm making this video is because I feel like it would be beneficial for other people to have this image in their mind. And I've spoken to many people, older, younger, all, walks of life. And many people don't believe that the climate, that the atmosphere, that the biosphere, all these things are affected by human activity. They think it's a hoax and, we're just being tricked by the libs or there's something, right? And I can understand that because it's difficult to absorb new information. It's difficult to change your ways. It's difficult to change your mind. And it's much harder if you are participating in it and you've benefited from it. If it attacks your image, for instance, if you're working for an industry that affects the climate in one way and you don't believe it does, or to accept that would make you feel like you're a bad person or whatever, you'll reject that information. It's a natural human thing to do, and I'm not casting blame here. I just want to give a as concise expression as possible, right? So I'm just going to throw out some stats to first start it, and then I'm going to go into a visual. And I know stats are not easily digested by people, so I'm going to try my best to make it simple and straightforward and not exhausting mentally. Right, so just to start, we all are complaining about CO2 in the atmosphere, right? So just to give an explanation of like the normal CO2 that we've had for the past, from about 1000 to 1800 AD, it's about 270, 280 parts per million, right? It didn't, and then in 1915 it was 300, 1988 350, 2015 400, and now in 2024 it's about 425 parts per million. So there's been a trend upward, right? As we've industrialized, as we've mined something that we're burning that produces CO2. It takes in oxygen, it burns it and releases the carbon dioxide, and it releases energy as well, right? I'll go into the nitrogen and the methane after, but I just want to say before industrialization, we had about 270, 280, and now in present day, it's about 425, right? So it's not doubled yet, but it's getting close. And so some effects you'll see if we didn't change anything else is the plants will grow faster because they have more access to the thing that actually grows them, which is a lot of us think that the soil grows the plant. A tree grows from absorbing from the soil, but what it actually does is it uses the soil as an anchor. It sends its roots out and there to collect micronutrients and to interact with the biological morass that's occurring, right, of all the microbes and the fungi and the rocks, basically. And then the water is what it is absorbing, right? It absorbs the water, and the water is kind of like, if you get spring water, it's got nutrients, micronutrients in it. It doesn't have any macronutrients, right? No energy. It just has elements, essentially. And they get their energy from the sun, and they get their fuel that their material to construct with from the air. So they absorb carbon dioxide, they use it to make carbohydrates, and they use the carbohydrates to make things. So they'll make sugar, but they'll also make their cellulose, which is just a different shape of sugar. It's still sugar, it's just a different starch and cellulose, which cellulose is what makes trees hard, what makes plants stiff. And it's produced by taking in that carbon dioxide, using the sun's energy, and it literally fabricates it. It's genius. So that's one way that the carbon dioxide is affecting us in a way that some may think is positive. I don't know if it's positive or negative. It's just one effect. Also, as the carbon dioxide level increases, it makes the ocean more acidic because the ocean actually absorbs, just like our blood does, it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It becomes carbonic acid. And so it makes it more acidic over time. So the pH of the ocean will actually go down over time, making it more acidic, as well as increasing the temperature. And then you also have the increase in the temperature because of the insulative effect, kind of like a blanket of air instead of a wool of air that's keeping the infrared, which is the heat producing light from the sun, in the system that we are living in, Earth, right? So you can I think of Earth, and I got a Tupperware here to make it easy. You can think of Earth as a closed system, right? So just like if you've ever left Tupperware out, you know stuff grows in it. So if you left some rice out, for instance, for a few days, and then it had mold in there, the mold is going to consume the nutrients, and then it's going to release metabolic waste. So let's just for this example, we're going to call it like waste gases, like CO2 for us is a waste gas as well for humans. We breathe in oxygen, we metabolize the food we've consumed, which is usually sugar or some form of sugar, or energy that's stored. Like fat runs slightly different, but fat runs similar to how your car works. Like it's a long chain, it burns it. So we run similarly to cars, but we also can run on sugar. Anyway, we're not going to get into that too deep. So it's pretty. If you've ever left it on the counter, you've seen the mold eats the stuff and it keeps releasing this gas, and eventually it kills itself, right? Because it's just made. It's breathing in its own fumes. At a certain point, it can't take it anymore, and it gets to a concentration and it dies. Just like with beer, when they brew beer, it can only have so much alcohol in it before the yeast dies from it, basically inhaling its own excrement. We're doing that. Humans are doing that on Earth. So for us, it's not so much the CO2 level, it's not the nitrogen, the NO2 level, it's not it is to a degree, but we make NO2, we make CO2, we make methane. It's not, and they're at concentrations that are not going to poison us, but it will affect our climate, and our climate will affect what can grow on the planet, and that will, we're eventually going to desertify ourselves if we're not careful, and we'll end up kind of like Arizona or the Middle East or the Sahara, like in Africa. So it's a threat. I don't want anyone to be worried. Just think about it. This is just to understand the concept, right? So as we mine these oils, or we call it crude oil, right? So it's It's basically detritus. It's decayed plant material that's decayed over a very long period of time. And then it's been compressed and crushed, I guess, and continues to decay in the absence of oxygen. And so it becomes this oily, filmy stuff, right? But originally, it came from plants absorbing energy from the sun and building things, and then within themselves, like building, like trees essentially. There were a bunch of trees, they fell over in a swampy area, or even similar to like Scotland, they have um, it's like shrubbery, small trees, I guess you'd say. They grow, they die, they grow, they die, they grow, they die, right? Over long periods of time. So in Scotland, they burn peat, and it's essentially if coal hadn't been compressed yet. Uh, and unlike coal, it's because coal's been compressed and the solid and the liquid have been separated from each other. So there's crude oil and coal. This one has it so that it's mixed together, and so it's called, they call it peat. It's just decayed plant material that's high in volatile compounds, I would say, right? So it's got free energy. I'm meandering a bit, but I want to kind of paint a picture to the best of my ability. There's a lot of information. So essentially we take these material, we introduce oxygen and high temperature, it combusts, it releases energy that we utilize to heat our homes, run our vehicles, and then we make electricity, which is basically the way we make electricity from fuel is the same it's always been pretty much, and it's like the steam engine, right? We heat up water, the water expands, the expansion is sent through a tube, it turns a turbine, the turbine like agitates electrons inside of a coil of wire, and that creates the electricity, right? And then we deal with the electricity. But it's basically we burn it. We burn everything. We're combusting it. We're exploding it. A car is just thousands of explosions a minute driving down the highway, right? Or wherever you're driving. And the same is for anything that uses an internal combustion engine. We're doing a similar thing. We respirate and we burn fuel and we create CO2 as well. Humans, like just living animals, don't produce a ton of CO2, not anything nearly as much as our vehicles do in terms of time periods. We're much more efficient machines. We're going to get away from that. So what I want to talk about as well as this is one thing that this debate or this topic, that one thing about it that has not been covered, I think, sufficiently, has been we're actually desertifying ourselves. Like, so by chopping down the Amazonian rainforest, for instance, or clearing land for development, which we're doing all over the planet, more and more, we're actually reducing how much carbon is taken out of the atmosphere by plants. Number one, right? So over time, our parts per million will actually increase. Even if we didn't change, even if everything was the same, just by doing that, we're actually reducing how much we can pull out of the atmosphere, right? So that's not good. The other thing is, because we're desertifying our areas by removing biomass. We're removing living material that absorbs carbon dioxide. We're also removing the insulative ability that is brought on by plants, because plants are made out of water, and water is really good at taking in heat it has a good capacity to store heat, absorb and release, so that temperatures stays about the same, right? And so if you've ever been in a desert, you understand it gets really hot during the day when the sun's out, and when it's not here, it's cold. It's freezing cold at night. Hot, cold, hot, cold. Having water present, like if you're in the ocean, even, the temperature's about the same most of the time. Like middle of the ocean on a bright day, it's gonna be about a certain temperature, and at night it will be close to the same temperature, because the capacity of the ocean to store that energy is massive, because water is very good at storing energy. It just is. You learn that in chem. So when we take out the plants, there's less water, because the whole plant is made out of water, just like us. It's not the whole plant, but most of it, like let's say 70%, just to be conservative, right? So if you have huge trees that are, I don't know, say you have a plot of trees and it's 40 tons of wood, then it's like, what? At least 30 tons or at least like 28 tons, whatever, is water. And that is going to regulate the temperature of the environment, right? And so I'm noticing it here in Florida. The summers are getting hotter. The trees actually communicate with the sky, which this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but there's a process that happens. The trees actually communicate with the sky and call clouds forward by participating in cloud seeding. They release volatile oils that actually float up and allow for atmospheric water to bind to it, and then that's how they create clouds. So it's kind of like, that was another topic I wanted to get over on this video, was cloud seeding, because people think that we have this magical ability with, they got the chemtrails, right? We have, the Saudis can control the weather. Like, no, it's not like that. I mean, you can only do so much. We only have so much ability, right? You can only work with what's there. It's not alchemy. We can't turn the lead into gold. They drop particulates in the atmosphere, just like how the trees work. Particulates in the atmosphere are there. Water is present in the atmosphere. You need both in order for a cloud to form. If there's a lot of water in the atmosphere and there are not particulates, there's nothing for the water to bind to. It won't create fog, I guess you would call it, or clouds. It won't happen. It will just be really humid. You can see how this process works if you've ever stuck a water bottle in the freezer and then you pull it out and it's still watery, and you're like, that's weird, and you open it and you pour it and it starts freezing as you pour it, and then it turns into a block of ice in your hand. It's because this is another chemical thing. For a crystal to form, it needs to have a surface that it can bind to, and if all of the it needs a seed, is what they would call it. It needs to be seeded. And so even if the temperature and pressure, if the conditions are right and it doesn't have something to start the crystal forming, it won't form. And the same is true of our clouds. Even if the conditions are right to make clouds, if there aren't things to set the seeds to make the cloud, it won't form. So trees themselves create these seeds through, I believe they're called terpenes, and they're volatile oils that they release. And when there's not enough water, they release a lot of them. And it goes up, and it basically, if there's any water available, it's going to form a cloud and it will drop it in that area. And if there's a large enough area of trees, it can really change the atmosphere, right? And that's why if you go into a forest, it has certain smells. You have the detritus smell of the ground, and you have, if you climb the trees, there's another smell that's up higher. It depends on the forest type as well, but we're getting a bit far off. So we're living in a system, and the climate change debate, or whatever we want to call it, I think the issue has been that it hasn't been presented in a palatable way, right? It's climate change is bad, you need to recycle, you can't have your cars, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, I don't want to change. I've been living my life this way, whatever. Realistically, we're not going to change these people's minds. Anyone on earth. The people who can grasp it will grasp it, and those that can't. It's up to us to figure out a way to fix it, even though it's continuing in that process. Even if you convince every single person on the planet and we gave up fossil fuels today, we would still have this happening because we've already started the process. What we need to do is figure out a way to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and use it in manufacturing of some sort so that we can use it as a substrate, basically, so that we can make stuff. Like, instead of mining iron or steel or nickel or put the metal, if we could capture CO2, create tubules, and then build things out of it, that would fix our problem. The thing is, we need somebody who can come up with that. So if you know someone, that'd be great. Let's get them on it. But you can do your part, planting trees or spreading wildflowers or whatever, but it's such a massive scale that it would need to be planet-wide effort, not through restricting people's freedoms, but through technology absorbing the carbon from the atmosphere to change the pH of our oceans, which is changing the life-carrying capacity of the oceans. And we would have to have more sustainable development on the planet that allowed people to have a good place to live, a healthy place to live, and also we would have to have a degree of population control because we'd have to understand the population carrying capacity of the Earth. But we're already trending towards it, even without human intervention. Modern people are having way less children than before, and so our population is going to peak and then it's going to decline. So that part is going to handle itself. Really, we need to just find a way to utilize the carbon from our atmosphere, similar to how trees do, as a substrate. But that's not exactly the topic of this video. The main topic was we are affecting the atmosphere of our planet. That's the way we're affecting it. And thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you like this content, subscribe. Or just, you don't even have to subscribe if you don't want to. If you like this content and you have other things that you're curious about, shoot me a message or leave a comment, and I'll get to it, likely. So, thanks for watching. Bye.